Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into the world of You Should Have Left? Released on June 19, 2020, this film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're uncovering every thrilling detail. If you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us grow. And for more incredible movie explorations and hidden gems, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's unravel the magic behind this cinematic masterpiece. You Should Have Left is a 2020 American psychological horror film written and directed by David Koepp, based on the 2017 book by Daniel Kellman. It stars Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried. Jason Blum served as a producer for his Blumhouse productions. Originally intended to be theatrically released, the film was released digitally via premium VOD on June 18, 2020, by Universal Pictures. It received mixed reviews from critics. Plot: Theodore Conroy is a retired banker married to Susanna, a young actress, and they have a daughter named Ella. The family books a vacation in Wales, but there is something strange about the house. Time passes unusually fast, and everybody experiences nightmares while staying there. The couple also discovers that neither one of them made the booking, each thinking the other did it. One night, Ella sees the shadow of a man on the wall. The next morning, she asks Susanna why people dislike Theo. Susanna reluctantly explains that Theo's first wife drowned in the bathtub, and people suspected that he killed her, though he was acquitted at trial. While in town for supplies, the shopkeeper asks if Theo has met Stettler, who Theo presumes is the home owner. He mysteriously gives Theo a drafting triangle and tells him to measure the right angles, leaving Theo confused. Theo has a dream that night and sees someone has written in his meditation journal, "You should leave. Go now." The following morning, Theo discovers Susanna has been hiding a secret phone from him. He confronts her, and she admits to an affair with an actor. Theo asks her to leave for the night, and she goes into town to stay at an inn. He returns to his journal to see that someone has now written, "You should have left. Now it's too late." Upon discovering an anomaly in the angle between the wall and floor, Theo and Ella measure the kitchen and find that it is larger inside than outside. They get separated, and they experience separate visions in the dream world. Once reunited, Theo calls Susanna, wanting her to come back and take him and Ella away from the house, but her phone is turned off. He then calls the shopkeeper, inquiring whether he knows of any cab services in the area. The shopkeeper replies that there are none and speaks of the house cryptically, saying that the devil collects souls from there. Desperate to escape the house, Theo and Ella decide to go to town by foot, but see a shadowy figure observing them from inside as they walk away from it. After some time, they find they have circled back to the house. Seeing no other option, they stay there for the night, but Theo enters the dream world again and sees his and Susanna's past selves as they first arrived at the house. He then meets Stettler. Theo asks Stettler to let Ella go, and Stettler says Theo is the one who is keeping her here. The next day, Susanna returns to the house. Theo finally confesses to the true circumstances surrounding the death of his first wife. He did not directly kill her, but did not help when she was drowning. He simply watched her die because he had been miserable with her for so long. He accepts that he belongs in the house, and lets Ella go with Susanna. Theo's spirit is then seen trapped inside the house, revealing he had been the figure watching himself and Ella leave the night before, having tried to warn his past self by writing the messages in his journal. The shopkeeper's voice says that some people do not leave the house and that the place finds them anyway. Cast: Kevin Bacon as Theo Conroy / Stettler. Amanda Seyfried as Susanna. Avery Essex as Ella. Colin Blumenau as shopkeeper. Laurie and Richards as Welsh woman. Production. In March 2018, it was announced Kevin Bacon would star in the film, with David Koepp directing and writing. Based on the novel of the same name by Daniel Kellman, Koepp and Bacon had previously collaborated on the 1999 film Stir of Echoes. Jason Blum served as a producer under his Blumhouse Productions banner. In June 2018, Amanda Seyfried joined the cast of the film. Filming took place at various locations in Wales, including at the Lifehouse in Llanbester, Radnorshire. Shooting also took place in Cresskill and Jersey City, New Jersey. Music. The film's score was composed by Jeff Zanelli. Backlot Music released the soundtrack on June 18, 2020, coinciding with the film's streaming release. On June 19, 2020, a psychological horror film emerged from the shadows of the genre, quietly slipping under the radar but gradually seizing the minds of those brave enough to watch. You Should Have Left became an unexpected cinematic experience, the kind of film that doesn't scream for attention but instead demands it through its atmosphere, its mounting tension, and its compellingly unsettling premise. Directed by David Koepp, a filmmaker known for his mastery of suspenseful storytelling, You Should Have Left takes audiences on a twisted journey that bends the rules of reality, challenges the limits of guilt, and makes us question the very nature of memory and identity. At first glance, the film might seem like a simple haunted house story, a secluded home in the Welsh countryside, a family seeking refuge, and then the inevitable descent into terrifying unknowns. But as you delve deeper, it becomes clear that You Should Have Left is more than just a supernatural thriller. It's a deep dive into the fragility of the human psyche, the relentless weight of past traumas, and the uncanny ability of the mind to reshape reality to fit its own narrative. The film's simplicity is deceptive, drawing you in with its quiet sense of dread, only to leave you questioning what is real and what is imagined as the tension builds to an overwhelming climax. This is a film that invites you to explore the limits of fear, but in doing so, it also confronts you with the limits of your own understanding. The plot revolves around Theo Conroy, played by Kevin Bacon, a man who is trying to escape the shadows of his past and create a fresh start with his wife, Susanna, Amanda Seyfried, and their young daughter, Ella, Avery Essex. They decide to rent a remote, modern house in Wales, hoping to unwind and recharge. The isolation of the location promises peace and quiet, the perfect setting for Theo to distance himself from the pressures of life and to work on his strained marriage. But soon, the house itself begins to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a prison. Unexplained events and disturbing phenomena begin to unfold, forcing Theo to confront not just the mysteries of the house, but also the darkest corners of his own mind. The house seems to distort in bizarre ways, its dimensions warped, rooms that should not exist, and the walls themselves beginning to close in on him, all the while heightening the ever-present feeling that something is terribly wrong. The longer Theo stays, the more the house feels like a physical manifestation of his guilt, with each terrifying event drawing him deeper into an abyss of paranoia. What makes You Should Have Left extraordinary is its ability to blur the lines between the supernatural and the psychological. While the eerie events and haunting visions play a central role, they are not the driving force behind the story. Instead, the film masterfully centers on the internal struggles of Theo Conroy. As the audience watches his descent into madness, it becomes increasingly unclear whether the house is haunted or if Theo is simply losing his grip on reality. The ambiguity is deliberate and unnerving. The truth is never fully revealed, and the narrative leaves much for interpretation, ensuring that the film lingers in your mind long after the credits roll. It is a film that invites viewers to question what is real, what is memory, and what is merely a trick of the mind, using the horror genre as a mirror to explore deeper emotional and psychological themes. Kevin Bacon's performance as Theo Conroy is a masterclass in restraint. He gives a nuanced portrayal of a man haunted by his own past, a man trying to outrun his mistakes only to be consumed by them. The character of Theo is deeply flawed, yet Bacon's skill allows the audience to empathize with him as he unravels, even as his actions become more erratic and desperate. Bacon brings a quiet intensity to the role, slowly building up the tension as Theo tries, and fails, to make sense of the horrors around him. What's especially captivating about his performance is how he plays the audience's perception of his character. At first, you feel for Theo, but as the film progresses, you start to question his motivations and his reliability as the narrator of his own story. There's something profoundly unsettling about watching a man slip deeper into delusion, especially when it becomes clear that his struggle is not just against external forces, but against his own memories and actions. Amanda Seyfried plays Susanna with a quiet strength that contrasts well against Bacon's more frantic portrayal of Theo. While Susanna's role may appear secondary at first, she becomes a key figure in the psychological tension that drives the film. As the strange occurrences in the house begin to take their toll, Susanna's reactions create a sense of doubt in both Theo and the audience. Is she truly unaffected by the house's bizarre behavior? Or is she hiding something? Seyfried's understated performance adds layers of complexity to her character, making her more than just a passive bystander in her husband's unraveling. She becomes a symbol of reason in the midst of chaos, and her involvement in the story provides a grounding force as Theo spirals deeper into madness. But it's not just the performances that make You Should Have Left so captivating. The visuals of the film play a significant role in creating a sense of disorientation and unease. The house itself is the centerpiece of the film, and its design is deliberately strange, its architecture bending the laws of space and time. As Theo roams the rooms, the house seems to stretch and contract in unnatural ways. There's a deliberate distortion of scale that serves to disorient the viewer, making it feel as though Theo is trapped in a maze that refuses to adhere to the rules of logic. This visual manipulation serves not only as a source of dread, but also as a metaphor for Theo's fractured mind, which is slowly being consumed by the very guilt he is trying to escape. The atmosphere of the film is one of isolation. The remote location in Wales, the emptiness of the countryside, and the stark, minimalist design of the house all contribute to the feeling of confinement and claustrophobia. Even though the setting is vast and open, the house becomes a prison, its eerie quietness intensifying the feeling that there is no escape. It's a world where time seems to stand still, where every door closed behind Theo feels like another barrier between him and any chance of redemption. This tension between the isolation of the house and the oppressive weight of the past that Theo cannot outrun is what makes the film so haunting. One of the film's most intriguing elements is its exploration of memory. As Theo begins to unravel, the line between his past and the present becomes increasingly blurred. The house, with its distorted rooms and shifting dimensions, mirrors his fractured psyche. His memories become unreliable, and the truths he thought he knew about himself, about his family, and about the house are constantly questioned. This psychological aspect of the film invites the audience to engage with Theo's trauma, to wonder whether the horrors he faces are the result of supernatural forces or the product of his own troubled mind. You Should Have Left quickly became a cultural phenomenon, not because it followed a formulaic horror plot, but because it subverted expectations. Unlike many horror films that rely heavily on jump scares or gore, You Should Have Left takes a more subtle approach, emphasizing atmosphere, psychological depth, and a slow-burning tension that keeps the audience on edge. The film's unpredictability and the ambiguity surrounding its events sparked endless debates among viewers, with many analyzing its layers of meaning and the complexities of its characters. The film's cultural impact was immediate, with audiences discussing everything from its haunting visuals to its unsettling themes of guilt and memory. People were drawn to its ability to blend the supernatural with the psychological in a way that felt fresh and innovative. And the ending, left viewers talking long after they had finished watching. It's a conclusion that doesn't offer neat answers, but instead leaves you with more questions, forcing you to confront the ambiguity of truth and perception. In the end, You Should Have Left is a film that works on multiple levels. It's a psychological thriller, a haunting ghost story, and a meditation on the human condition, all wrapped up in one disorienting package. Its ability to blend horror with deep emotional resonance is what makes it so remarkable. It's a film that doesn't just play with your sense of fear, it plays with your perception of reality itself. And that's what makes it worth exploring in depth. It's a movie that lingers in your mind, making you question your own experiences, your own memories, and the stories you tell yourself to make sense of the world around you. So, why should viewers dive deeper into the details of You Should Have Left? Because it's a movie that invites you to look beyond the surface and confront the shadows lurking in the corners of your own mind. It's a cinematic experience that demands attention and rewards those willing to engage with its complexities. In a world filled with horror films that follow predictable paths, You Should Have Left stands out as a chilling, thought-provoking exploration of the fragility of the human mind and the terrifying power of memory. In You Should Have Left, 2020, the opening moments pull you into an eerie atmosphere of discomfort and foreboding. As the camera lingers on wide, sweeping shots of a remote and desolate Welsh countryside, The quiet beauty of the location contrasts with an unsettling tension that begins to build even before the characters arrive at the house. It's a place meant for peace and retreat, but from the very first glance, it feels like the calm before a storm. The house is isolated, modern, sleek, almost too perfect in its design, and yet there's something about it that feels wrong. The film begins with Theo Conroy, Kevin Bacon, in a personal crisis. He's a man trying to outrun a past that's both destructive and complicated, burdened by a mistake that haunts him. Theo isn't just facing a literal journey to escape. He's confronting his own inner demons. The opening scenes paint a picture of his fractured, fragile state of mind. Theo's career as a banker and his life have both fallen apart, largely due to a scandal that's not entirely clear yet. His personal life is similarly in disarray, torn apart by a troubled marriage and the trauma of the past. This is where we meet his wife, Susanna, Amanda Seyfried, a successful actress who is far more composed than Theo, but there's something beneath the surface that makes you wonder if their relationship is as perfect as it seems. Together, they have a daughter, Ella, Avery Essex, a quiet, observant child who seems unaware of the tension between her parents. They decide to rent a house in the countryside for some time away from the stress of their lives, hoping to reconnect and find peace. Theo, in particular, seems to see this getaway as an opportunity to reset. The idea of getting away from everything, the prying eyes of the world and the pressure of his personal failings, is something he believes could help him heal. There's an unspoken hope that this retreat will be their chance to fix what's broken. But the house, as perfect as it is, becomes a symbol of their fractured lives. As they drive through the rugged landscape, they discuss their reasons for being there, with Theo downplaying the growing tension between them. Despite the backdrop of scenic beauty, there's a sense that things aren't quite right. A dark undercurrent flows through their conversations, and you start to feel that whatever peace they hope to find here will be elusive at best. The house itself is stunning, minimalistic in its design, sleek and modern, but immediately unnerving. From the moment they step inside, something feels off. The house, with its sharp angles, cold surfaces, and cavernous spaces, almost feels like a character in its own right, distorted, like a reflection of Theo's own fractured state. It's everything they need on the surface. Spacious, well-lit, a sanctuary, but there's a subtle discomfort that lingers in every corner. It doesn't take long before the couple starts to notice strange things. The first hint of something wrong comes when they realize that the house seems much larger than it should be. The dimensions don't quite add up. Rooms that shouldn't fit into the house do, and spaces that seem impossibly vast in comparison to the exterior. At first, it's an unease that's hard to pin down. Little details begin to stir Theo's anxiety, but it's easy to chalk it up to nerves. The tension between Theo and Susanna is palpable, too. As the days pass, it becomes clear that their relationship is anything but perfect. Theo is a man who has been broken by his past, and Susanna, though supportive, is clearly weary of his emotional baggage. She, too, is distant, and the cracks in their marriage begin to show. There's an underlying tension that makes every interaction between them fraught, each conversation laced with an unspoken bitterness that neither can address directly. Susanna seems to understand that this trip might be their last chance to reconnect, but Theo is far more focused on escaping his past than on repairing what's broken between them. As the house shifts and warps, so does the relationship. Both seem to be at a breaking point. The first real jolt comes when Theo starts noticing subtle, inexplicable changes in the house. One evening, while exploring the property, he comes across a door he doesn't remember seeing before. It's a door that wasn't there when they first arrived, and it leads to a room that wasn't part of the original layout. He's unnerved but tries to dismiss it. The sense of disorientation starts to set in. Theo finds himself questioning the very structure of the house and, by extension, his own sanity. The more he explores, the more unsettling things become. Rooms change, spaces stretch, and there's no clear explanation for what's happening. But the house is more than just a maze of strange corridors. It's an uncanny mirror of Theo's mental state, constantly shifting in ways that make him feel out of control. He's losing his grip, but what's causing this? Is it the house? Or is it something much deeper within himself? As these bizarre occurrences continue, Theo's behavior becomes more erratic. He begins to grow more paranoid, more distrustful of the house, and more distant from Susanna. When they confront the changes in the house, she brushes them off as simple quirks of an old structure, things that could be easily explained away. But Theo isn't convinced. His growing anxiety reaches a boiling point when he begins to experience strange visions. He starts seeing people who aren't there, hearing noises in empty rooms, and feeling a presence that he can't explain. He finds himself haunted by his past in the most surreal of ways, and the house seems to amplify these feelings. It's clear that Theo is not just dealing with the physical mysteries of the house, but also with the emotional ghosts of his own history. One pivotal moment comes when Theo finds a mysterious photograph of a woman in one of the rooms. The image is old, and it appears to show someone he recognizes, someone from his past. The photograph is the first real piece of the puzzle, hinting at a connection between the house and the secrets that Theo has long buried. As the night grows darker and more unsettling, Theo becomes increasingly obsessed with finding the truth. He searches the house relentlessly, convinced that the answers lie somewhere within its shifting walls. The more he uncovers, the more the house seems to mock him, its very structure warping with each step he takes. The tension builds to a point where the house itself feels like a suffocating presence, pressing down on him with an almost malevolent force. The growing fear reaches its peak when, one night, Theo wakes up to find that the house is even more distorted than before. The walls are no longer familiar, the doors lead to impossible places, and everything seems to be closing in on him. At this point, it's clear that Theo's fears are not just psychological. There's something deeply wrong with the house itself. The layout of the house is impossibly fluid, like a nightmare that refuses to let go. He begins to realize that he's trapped, both physically in the house and emotionally in the web of guilt that he's trying to escape. The house is no longer just a retreat, it has become a prison. Theo's paranoia intensifies, but there's something else at play here. The house seems to know things about him that it shouldn't. It knows his past, his mistakes, and his darkest fears. The walls seem to whisper to him, taunting him with memories that he desperately wants to forget. The deeper Theo delves into the house's strange behaviors, the more he starts to question his own mind. Is he losing touch with reality? Or is there truly something supernatural at work here? All of this comes to a head in a confrontation between Theo and Susanna, in which the tension between them reaches its boiling point. Susanna, trying to hold onto some semblance of sanity, begins to push back against the idea that the house is influencing Theo's behavior. She suggests that maybe it's just the stress and his past catching up to him. But Theo, frantic and on the edge, refuses to believe this. He becomes consumed by the idea that the house is somehow connected to the horrors of his past and that it's feeding off his fears. As the first half of the film draws to a close, the tension is unbearable. The house has become a living, breathing entity, its shifting rooms and mysterious corridors only adding to the feeling of being trapped. Theo's grip on reality is slipping, and the audience is left hanging on the edge of their seats, wondering whether what's happening is a supernatural force at play or if Theo is simply unraveling before our eyes. The suspense is palpable, and the film expertly keeps you guessing. Just when you think you have a handle on what's happening, it shifts, and you're left wondering whether the truth will ever be revealed. With every passing minute, you should have left sets the stage for a mind-bending unraveling of secrets, both supernatural and deeply psychological. The first half is just a taste of the terror and confusion that's to come, and by the time the film's second half begins, you're already so immersed in its mystery that the twists ahead promise to be even more unsettling than what's already unfolded. The film's ability to keep you in suspense, while slowly feeding you bits of information, ensures that the journey will only get darker from here. The second half of You Should Have Left intensifies the psychological and supernatural tension that the first half expertly sets up. With Theo Conroy's sanity unraveling in a house that seems to be both a literal and psychological prison, the stakes grow higher, and the atmosphere becomes suffocating. What begins as an isolated retreat for Theo, his wife Susanna, and their daughter Ella soon turns into a race against time. an attempt to understand the horrors that seem to plague them, or perhaps more disturbingly, the horrors within Theo's own mind. The first cracks in the facade of reality began to show in the house's unsettling architecture, its shifting dimensions, and the strange occurrences that plagued Theo. Yet, despite these ominous signs, it wasn't until the last few moments of the first half that the audience fully began to understand just how deeply entwined Theo's past is with the house's malevolent force. In the second half, everything begins to unravel. Theo's increasing paranoia takes center stage. As his grip on reality falters, he becomes obsessed with discovering the truth about the house. But the more he digs, the more he becomes convinced that the house isn't just alive. It's actively manipulating him, using his memories against him. The house is not merely haunted. It is a manifestation of his own guilt, a cruel reminder of the past mistakes he cannot escape. Theo believes the house holds the key to unraveling the mystery of his emotional and psychological decay, but he's not prepared for the terrifying truths that await him. By the time the second half begins, it's clear that the house's influence is far deeper than Theo initially imagined. The physical distortions continue, and the house becomes even more labyrinthine, with rooms and hallways seemingly leading nowhere. Each turn feels more like a descent into madness, as the house begins to taunt Theo with fragments of his own life, his most painful memories, and, most hauntingly, the people he's wronged. These flashbacks, glimpses of past betrayals and losses, become interwoven with the increasingly bizarre events that unfold. There are moments when Theo finds himself wandering the house, uncertain whether he's in a room from his present or a fragment from his past. The house begins to blur the lines between time and space, turning the walls into a reflection of his fractured psyche. In one pivotal moment, Theo stumbles upon a secret door, another new addition to the house that wasn't there before. The door leads him to a hidden room that's sealed off from the rest of the house, a room that seems impossibly small compared to the vastness of the rest of the structure. Inside, he finds an object that sends him into a spiral of horror, a worn, old diary belonging to someone from his past. As he flips through the pages, he reads chilling entries that detail a man's descent into madness, a man who is clearly haunted by the same forces that now seem to torment Theo. The diary is another piece of the puzzle, but its revelation only deepens the mystery. It hints at the existence of a prior tenant or previous owner of the house, someone whose tragic story mirrors Theo's own. There's an eerie parallel that begins to form. This house, it seems, has always been a place where people are consumed by their own demons. But it's not just the diary that disturbs Theo. It's a strange sensation that overcomes him when he starts to feel as if the house is watching him, as if the walls are closing in on him. The house's strange, shifting geometry, its rooms that appear out of nowhere, and the objects that inexplicably appear in places they shouldn't, all contribute to this growing sense that Theo is not just losing his mind. He is being manipulated. His confusion deepens as he begins to see strange visions, flashbacks that blur the line between what's happening in the present and what happened in the past. One of the most significant developments in the second half of the film comes when Theo uncovers more details about his own life, particularly his former relationships and the scandal that derailed his career. It becomes evident that Theo's trauma and guilt are at the heart of everything happening in the house. His emotional baggage has manifested in the form of the house's distorted layout. The house is not simply an object of terror. It is a reflection of Theo's guilt, his fears, and his attempts to outrun the mistakes he made. Each room, each corridor that doesn't make sense, each passageway that leads to nowhere is another part of his psyche being mirrored back at him. The walls of the house seem to mock him with every turn, each space more labyrinthine than the last. Meanwhile, Susanna, who has tried to be the voice of reason in the midst of Theo's unraveling, starts to question the reality of their situation as well. As the events grow more terrifying, she becomes convinced that the house is more than just a psychological manifestation of Theo's guilt. She begins to wonder if it might actually be cursed or haunted by some supernatural force. In one memorable scene, Susanna confronts Theo, desperate to understand why he is so adamant that the house is connected to his past. It's here that the tension between them reaches a breaking point. Susanna's skepticism clashes with Theo's obsession, and their relationship teeters on the edge of collapse. She can no longer deny the mounting strangeness of the house, but she still tries to hold onto the belief that there is a logical explanation for everything. However, as the house continues to bend and stretch in ways that defy all reason, even she begins to question her own beliefs. The turning point comes when Theo discovers something that takes him to the very core of the mystery, the house's true nature. In one of the most chilling sequences of the film, Theo finds a hidden room that appears to be a reflection of the house itself, but with an added twist. This room contains mirrors that distort reality in nightmarish ways. When Theo looks into them, he doesn't just see his reflection. He sees versions of himself that he cannot recognize. Some are disheveled and unkempt. Others appear to be broken versions of him, as if they are ghosts of himself from different timelines. It's here, in the twisted mirrors, that Theo realizes the truth. The house is not merely distorting the space around him, but also distorting his very perception of time, of memory, and of who he is. He is trapped in a cycle of his own making, unable to escape the guilt and mistakes that have come to define him. The final, horrifying twist comes when Theo confronts the ultimate revelation. He has been here before. The house, the distorted rooms, the mirrors. They are not just figments of his imagination. He has returned to the house that he once lived in, a house that holds the memories of his past mistakes, his deepest regrets, and his greatest fear. The house itself is a manifestation of the trauma he inflicted on those around him. He is trapped in a loop, endlessly reliving the horrors of his past without realizing that the house has been guiding him toward this self-inflicted punishment. In the film's climax, the supernatural elements take full form, revealing that Theo's past sins have caught up to him in the most horrifying way. His mistakes, the people he's wronged, and the things he's tried to bury all come rushing to the surface. The house becomes a prison of his own guilt, a prison that he cannot escape from. Every room that he enters is a reminder of the past, a reminder of what he cannot undo. His own psychological state has broken him down to the point where the house is both a literal and metaphorical reflection of his inner torment. In a final confrontation between Theo and Susanna, the truth is fully revealed. Susanna, who has been part of Theo's life for so long, is revealed to be the one person who Theo cannot escape from. She is the person he's wronged the most, and in an agonizing twist, it becomes clear that Theo's guilt is not just tied to the house. It's tied to the woman he loves. The house, in its twisted logic, has turned Susanna into a reflection of his past mistakes, a constant reminder that Theo can never outrun the consequences of his actions. As the house closes in on Theo, trapping him in the same place over and over again, the film's resolution becomes inevitable. The house, which once seemed to be a place of refuge, has become his final prison, a space where his guilt will consume him. The narrative threads of guilt, fear, and memory have all come full circle, and Theo is left with the bitter realization that there is no escape from what he has done. The final shot of the film is haunting, a reminder that the past can never truly be outrun, and that some mistakes are simply too big to escape. You Should Have Left masterfully builds its suspense in the second half, delivering a final sequence that is both psychologically devastating and deeply unsettling. The film's slow burn pays off as it seamlessly connects the supernatural elements with Theo's internal struggles. The result is a narrative that challenges our perceptions of memory, guilt, and the consequences of our actions. In the end, Theo is left to confront the house and the life he tried to leave behind, in a horrifying resolution that leaves audiences with the chilling reminder that some ghosts are more than just figments of the imagination. In You Should Have Left, the characters are not just integral to the story, they embody the very psychological and supernatural forces that drive the narrative forward. The film explores themes of guilt, memory, and trauma, and each character, through their actions and internal conflicts, represents different facets of these themes. The two central figures, Theo Conroy and Susanna, are brought to life by powerful performances from Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried. Their nuanced portrayals infuse the film with depth and emotional complexity, making the characters' journeys feel personal, raw, and deeply unsettling. Theo Conroy, Kevin Bacon, is a man weighed down by his past. From the moment we meet him, He feels like a man on the edge, barely holding onto the remnants of his former life. Bacon's portrayal of Theo is one of restraint and vulnerability, with every action and expression seeming to scream that something is not right beneath the surface. Theo is a successful banker whose life has been ruined by a scandal, a failure that haunts him. However, the true nature of his downfall is kept shrouded in mystery until later in the film, but the damage it has done is clear. There is a palpable sense of despair surrounding him, as if he's been living in a kind of emotional exile, trying to outrun his mistakes but knowing deep down that they will catch up to him. Theo's motivations are rooted in his desperate desire for redemption and escape. Renting the remote house is his attempt to repair what's broken in his life, both his relationship with his wife and his fractured psyche. However, it quickly becomes apparent that Theo is not merely trying to escape the pressures of his career or his failing marriage. He's running from himself. The house, with its shifting walls and endless maze of rooms, reflects his own internal chaos. Bacon's performance captures this turmoil perfectly. He portrays Theo's growing paranoia and desperation with subtlety, avoiding overt melodrama while still managing to convey a sense of unraveling madness. The audience can feel the weight of Theo's past weighing on him in every scene. Whether he's alone, walking through the eerie, empty house, or interacting with his wife and daughter, he seems constantly on edge, as if the house itself is a manifestation of his guilt and regret. The turning point for Theo comes when he begins to realize that the house might not just be a physical structure but a reflection of his own mind, a prison built from the trauma he's endured. Bacon's portrayal of Theo's emotional breakdown is both haunting and captivating. His quiet moments of reflection are just as powerful as the more frantic scenes of panic. As Theo delves deeper into the mystery of the house, he starts seeing glimpses of the past, flashbacks that reveal the choices he made and the people he hurt. These fragments of his history are crucial to understanding his character arc. They show a man who has been running for so long, trying to suppress his guilt, that he's now completely lost in his own delusions. It's through these moments of self-reckoning that we see the depths of Theo's character. And Bacon's portrayal ensures that every twist of Theo's fate is felt with great emotional intensity. It's not just that Theo is struggling with a supernatural force. He is struggling with the ghost of his own actions. Then there's Susanna, Amanda Seyfried, Theo's wife, whose own complex arc slowly unravels alongside her husband's. From the outset, Susanna appears to be the more grounded, rational character. She's a successful actress, composed, seemingly in control of her life and career. However, as the tension in the house builds, it becomes clear that she too is carrying her own baggage, and much of it is tied to her relationship with Theo. Seyfried plays Susanna with a quiet strength, never overplaying her hand but always conveying the subtle layers of doubt, confusion, and fear that she's feeling. She's a woman caught between supporting her husband, who is clearly falling apart, and trying to maintain her own sense of sanity in a house that seems to distort everything she thought she knew about reality. While Theo's personal demons are the central focus, Susanna's journey is just as significant. She is initially skeptical about the idea that the house is somehow connected to Theo's past. She tries to rationalize the strange occurrences, hoping that she and Theo can simply move past the tension between them and find peace. However, as the house begins to distort reality in increasingly inexplicable ways, Susanna becomes more and more convinced that something is wrong. She's not just trying to protect her family, but she's also struggling with her own feelings of guilt and frustration. Her distance from Theo, her own emotional struggles, and the pressure to keep the family together add depth to her character. Seyfried does an exceptional job of portraying Susanna's internal conflict. She is caught between wanting to help Theo and wanting to preserve her own peace of mind. Her performance is subtle, but as the horror begins to encroach on her own sense of reality, the cracks in her calm demeanor slowly start to show. There are moments where Susanna appears exhausted, both physically and emotionally, as she's trying to balance the increasingly surreal and terrifying events with her desire to protect her daughter and hold her family together. Yet, she also becomes more of an emotional anchor for Theo, despite the growing tension between them. Seyfried's portrayal of Susanna is a quiet yet powerful exploration of the toll that trauma and guilt can take on a relationship. She serves as a foil to Theo, someone who desperately wants to find a rational explanation for the inexplicable, but who is increasingly drawn into the same emotional turmoil that Theo is experiencing. Ella, Avery Essex, the couple's young daughter, plays a smaller but essential role in the story. Although she's a child, Ella is a silent observer of the growing chaos around her. Unlike her parents, she seems to remain more grounded, almost unaffected by the creeping terror in the house. She represents innocence, but there's also an unsettling quality to her character. She is the only one who seems to understand the house's strange nature. In one particularly chilling moment, Ella makes a comment about how the house is alive, in a way that suggests a deeper understanding of what's really happening than her parents are willing to acknowledge. She is the emotional anchor in a sense, the one who is least affected by the supernatural aspects of the house, and yet her presence serves as a stark contrast to the psychological breakdown unfolding around her. Ella's significance in the story is mostly symbolic. She is a reminder of what is at stake, the family dynamic that is being torn apart by Theo's actions and the house's malevolent influence. In the midst of the horror, Ella remains the one thing that Theo and Susanna cannot afford to lose, which only makes the horror more intense. Her silence, her moments of observation, and her innocent statements add a layer of tension to the film, as they often hint at truths that the adults in her life are too emotionally wrapped up to see. As the events spiral further into madness, her presence is a quiet reminder that while the house may be manipulating them, it's ultimately their own unresolved issues that are the real source of the terror. In terms of supporting characters, the film keeps things relatively minimal. The absence of external characters or larger interactions with the world beyond the house increases the isolation and psychological claustrophobia that permeates the film. This is not just a haunted house story. It's a personal and intimate descent into madness, and the lack of outside influence heightens the tension. The absence of others also reflects the emotional distance between Theo and Susanna. As the house distorts reality, they're left with only each other, and even that relationship begins to crack under the pressure. Their interactions with each other, as well as their individual journeys of self-discovery and guilt, become the heart of the story. Every character, from the haunted Theo to the weary Susanna, to the silent observer in Ella, plays a vital role in illustrating the film's themes of guilt, memory, and the inescapable consequences of one's actions. Each actor brings their character to life with depth and authenticity, making them not just a part of the narrative, but symbols of the psychological and emotional forces at play in the story. Through their performances, the film resonates on a deeply personal level, making each twist and revelation not just a supernatural event, but a reflection of the characters' internal battles. Ultimately, You Should Have Left is as much about the characters' internal struggles as it is about the eerie, supernatural occurrences within the house. The characters' motivations, transformations, and emotional arcs are intricately tied to the film's themes of guilt, fear, and redemption. Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried deliver haunting, layered performances that make Theo and Susanna's journeys unforgettable, while Avery Essex's Ella provides a silent, innocent contrast to the growing terror around her. Together, they create a deeply compelling story that is as much about the human psyche as it is about the supernatural forces at play. In You Should Have Left, the layers of storytelling are intricately woven together with a rich tapestry of hidden details, subtle references, and cultural nods that reward sharp-eyed viewers. The film's use of symbolism, foreshadowing, and clever callbacks creates an immersive experience for those who are willing to dig deeper. It's not just a supernatural thriller. It's a film that thrives on its complexity, where every element, from the house's architecture to seemingly throwaway lines, contributes to the narrative in profound ways. One of the most striking aspects of the film is the way the house itself becomes a character, one whose manipulations of space and time are mirrored in the emotional and psychological journeys of the characters, particularly Theo. But even more than that, the house reflects the very nature of guilt, as if it is the manifestation of everything that Theo has repressed over the years. From the very beginning, there's a palpable sense of foreboding around the house. The strange angles of the architecture, the way rooms seem to expand or contract, and the unsettling geometry of the space itself are all clues that something is amiss. For sharp-eyed viewers, The very design of the house serves as a clever visual metaphor for the human psyche. The house's constantly shifting structure could be seen as a physical manifestation of Theo's fractured mind. The labyrinthine hallways that seem to stretch on endlessly, the odd angles, and the room that appears to be too small for its surroundings. It all symbolizes Theo's internal struggle with his past and his inability to escape his guilt. In one particularly haunting sequence, Theo discovers a series of mirrors that reflect a distorted version of himself, which could be seen as an allegory for the way the house distorts his perception of reality and his identity. The mirrors serve as a physical manifestation of Theo's fractured sense of self, hinting at his emotional breakdown and the way his mind is splintering under the weight of the past. As the house continues to warp and twist, so too do the characters' relationships and their sense of time. One of the key elements that creates an atmosphere of unease is the film's handling of time. Time in this house seems to be fluid, moments stretch and compress, and the normal passage of time seems suspended. The house itself seems to have its own rhythm, one that is disconnected from the real world. This manipulation of time is mirrored in Theo's flashbacks, where moments from his past blend with the present, suggesting that he's not just physically trapped in the house but emotionally trapped in his memories as well. In a subtle but chilling moment, Theo reflects on a memory of a time when he was happy, and as the camera pans over his face, it's clear that the memory is both distant and painful. This blur between time and memory further deepens the psychological tension at the core of the film. Another clever use of time as a motif occurs with the film's treatment of Theo's relationship with Susanna. Throughout the film, their interactions feel increasingly disjointed. The growing distance between them, both emotionally and physically, echoes the house's manipulation of reality. The house, in many ways, is a metaphor for the psychological distance between Theo and Susanna. Their moments of intimacy, like the early scenes where they're in bed together or when they're discussing their daughter Ella, are often interrupted by sudden, jarring moments that disrupt their connection. Whether it's a strange noise from the house or Theo's sudden outbursts, these interruptions feel like a representation of the emotional walls between them, much like the walls of the house itself. The film also plays with the theme of duality and mirrored realities, using the house's constantly shifting rooms as a visual metaphor for the characters' emotional states. In one pivotal scene, Theo discovers a hidden door that leads to a room that feels eerily similar to one he's already been in. This sense of déjà vu is not just a supernatural phenomenon. It's a manifestation of Theo's emotional baggage. The house seems to be forcing him to confront the past again and again, much like his inability to escape his guilt. The scene where Theo stumbles across a small, claustrophobic room filled with mirrors is particularly significant in this regard. The mirrors reflect not only his image but also the distorted, fractured versions of himself, versions of Theo that he has tried to forget. This scene foreshadows his eventual realization that he's trapped not just in the house, but in a cycle of self-loathing and regret that he cannot escape. As the tension builds, viewers might notice the subtle use of color to highlight the characters' emotional states. The film's muted, desaturated color palette, full of grays, blues, and washed-out tones, serves to create a sense of isolation and desolation. In particular, the color red makes an appearance at key moments throughout the film, marking significant emotional or supernatural events. In one scene, Theo finds a red object in the house, a subtle but chilling visual cue that indicates something is about to go terribly wrong. This use of color is an example of the film's subtle yet powerful approach to visual storytelling. It's a reminder that every object, every detail in the house, is imbued with meaning, even if it's not immediately apparent to the viewer. The film's deliberate pace and carefully constructed atmosphere also allow for some subtle cultural references and callbacks to other works in the psychological horror genre. The film draws inspiration from classic haunted house stories, particularly those where the house itself is an extension of the character's psyche. In this regard, You Should Have Left pays homage to films like The Shining, where the isolation of the characters in a remote location serves to heighten the psychological tension. However, unlike The Shining, which focuses heavily on the psychological breakdown of a single character, Jack Torrance, You Should Have Left takes a more nuanced approach, exploring not just the unraveling of Theo but also the emotional dynamics between him and Susanna. There are also subtle nods to the work of other filmmakers known for exploring the boundaries between reality and illusion. The film's manipulation of time and space, its use of mirrors and reflections, and the constant feeling that something is just out of reach all evoke the surreal, dreamlike quality of films like The Sixth Sense or Jacob's Ladder. These references are not overt, but they add a layer of depth for those who are familiar with the genre. The film plays with audience expectations, leading them down one path only to reveal that the reality they thought they understood was never quite what it seemed. One of the most rewarding Easter eggs in the film comes in the form of the hidden diary Theo discovers in the house. The diary, which initially seems to belong to a previous tenant of the house, is a key to understanding the house's history and the patterns of madness that have plagued those who've lived there before. The diary's entries, chilling accounts of the writer's descent into paranoia, mirror Theo's own unraveling, creating an eerie sense of déjà vu. The idea that this house has been the site of countless psychological breakdowns becomes a critical part of the narrative, and the diary serves as a subtle but effective piece of foreshadowing. It hints that the house is not merely haunted by supernatural forces, but by the very real consequences of guilt, trauma, and the inability to move on from one's past. Another clever Easter egg involves the house's ever-changing structure. As the film progresses, viewers may notice that certain rooms and hallways seem to repeat or mirror each other. This visual cue serves as a metaphor for Theo's internal conflict and his inability to escape his past mistakes. The house is not just a physical space. It is a reflection of the cyclical nature of guilt and regret, trapping its occupants in an endless loop of self-doubt and remorse. The subtle repetitions in the architecture provide a visual representation of Theo's emotional journey, rewarding viewers who pay attention to the smallest details. The film also plays with the idea of what is truly terrifying. It's not the physical threat of a haunting, but the psychological terror of facing one's own mistakes and regrets. In this way, You Should Have Left subverts traditional haunted house tropes, offering instead a chilling exploration of how our minds can become prisons, and how guilt can distort reality itself. The supernatural elements are cleverly woven into the story, but the true horror of the film lies in the emotional unraveling of its characters. As viewers peel back the layers of You Should Have Left, they'll find that every detail, every reference, and every unsettling moment is designed to enhance the psychological and emotional impact of the film. From the house's shifting geometry to the symbolic use of mirrors, to the hidden diary that foreshadows the twists to come, the film rewards those who pay close attention. It's a slow burn of subtle revelations, each detail building on the last, creating a web of meaning that is as intellectually rewarding as it is emotionally haunting. For those willing to dig deep, You Should Have Left is a treasure trove of hidden insights, each discovery adding another layer to the film's complex and disturbing portrait of guilt, trauma, and the inescapable past. The making of You Should Have Left was as much a psychological labyrinth as the house at the center of the film. From its complex narrative structure to the eerie atmosphere captured on screen, the behind-the-scenes journey of this 2020 psychological thriller reveals a series of fascinating challenges, creative choices, and unexpected moments that shaped the final product. While the film plays with the boundaries between reality and illusion, the production itself was full of its own set of surreal twists and turns. Let's dive into the strange facts and behind-the-scenes stories that make this film as intriguing off-screen as it is on-screen. First, let's talk about the filming location, which serves as one of the most integral parts of the film. The story's setting is a modern, minimalist house nestled in the remote countryside, a place that feels both open and suffocating at the same time. This location is central to the film's haunting atmosphere, and surprisingly, it wasn't built on a studio lot. In fact, You Should Have Left was filmed at a real, existing house in Germany. The house is a striking example of contemporary architecture, and its cold, angular design became a character in itself throughout the film. Filming in a real house instead of a studio set came with its own set of challenges. For one, the house was designed with minimalism in mind, meaning it had a lot of open spaces and unconventional layouts. This made it both a visual treat and a logistical nightmare. Director David Koepp and his team had to contend with the difficulties of shooting in such a space, where angles and perspectives were constantly shifting. The house's fluid, almost disorienting design was central to the film's unsettling atmosphere, but it wasn't easy to work with. The production team had to strategically plan shots to make the house feel like a place where time and space were malleable. They relied heavily on the house's physical limitations, but also had to use clever camera tricks to create the visual illusion of the house warping and changing. What's fascinating is that, despite the disorienting design of the house, the filmmakers made a conscious decision to keep the setting feeling grounded in reality. The film's slow-burn pacing and minimalist approach to horror are a stark contrast to the usual jump-scare tactics we see in typical supernatural thrillers. Instead, Koepp chose to build tension through small, subtle moments, like a door that seems to close on its own or a shadow that lingers too long, relying on the actors' performances and the eerie setting to create unease, rather than relying on more overt supernatural effects. This minimalist approach extended to the production design, which avoided over-the-top visual flourishes, instead opting for subtle details like strange sounds, shadows, and shifting reflections. In many ways, the house became a physical manifestation of the characters' psychological states, and the filmmakers chose to capture it in a way that reflected the growing dissonance between reality and illusion. The architectural intricacies of the house also led to some unique filming challenges. The crew had to deal with limited space, particularly when setting up intricate shots or following the actors through the maze-like halls. Some scenes were filmed in a specific order, requiring the crew to navigate tight corners, low ceilings, and odd room proportions. These spatial limitations, which might seem like an obstacle to the average film production, actually ended up adding to the disorienting nature of the film. At times, the camera had to bend in ways that suggested the house itself was distorting. The design of the space seemed to collapse into itself, with hallways and rooms appearing to stretch unnaturally. This forced perspective was achieved through a combination of practical and digital effects, where the production team would carefully place mirrors, lighting, and carefully calibrated camera angles to create the illusion of a house that was alive and shifting. In many scenes, the camera seems to wander, getting lost in the house in ways that mirror the character's own struggles with confusion and disorientation. This technique reflects a core theme of the film: the idea that the house, and by extension the world around them, is both real and unreal at the same time. The casting of Kevin Bacon as Theo Conroy was an essential decision in grounding the film's psychological weight. Bacon, known for his wide-ranging roles, brings a level of emotional depth to the character that's almost palpable. However, one of the most fascinating behind-the-scenes stories involves Bacon's approach to his character. Known for being deeply involved in the creative process, Bacon took a hands-on approach to developing Theo's emotional arc. In the lead-up to filming, he worked closely with director David Koepp to understand the internal struggles of the character, particularly Theo's guilt over his past mistakes. Bacon described the role as challenging, not because of the physical demands of the film, but because of the emotional complexity involved. One of the key decisions Bacon made was to portray Theo's unraveling as a slow burn, rather than an immediate, dramatic breakdown. Instead of leaning into grand, theatrical moments, Bacon chose to convey the character's mental disintegration in a more subtle, almost invisible way. The constant, quiet tension in his expressions and mannerisms, paired with the growing sense of dread in his eyes, created an undercurrent of horror that pervades his character's journey. This choice wasn't easy, though. Bacon had to spend significant time studying the psychological effects of trauma and guilt to convincingly portray Theo's emotional collapse. Amanda Seyfried, who plays Susanna, also embraced a deeply immersive approach to her role. Seyfried, known for her versatility and nuanced performances, described her character as someone caught in a marriage that is crumbling under the weight of emotional and psychological strain. To prepare for the role, Seyfried spent time exploring the dynamics of strained relationships and what it would feel like to be in Susanna's position, constantly caught between supporting her husband and maintaining her own sense of self. Interestingly, Seyfried's own experience with motherhood became a vital part of her performance. At the time of filming, she had recently become a mother herself, and she described this experience as deeply influencing her portrayal of a protective mother trying to keep her family together in the face of Ultimately, the key moments of You Should Have Left work together to create a film that is both emotionally devastating and thematically rich. The psychological tension builds steadily throughout the film, with each scene contributing to the larger narrative of guilt, isolation, and the inability to escape the past. The film's most powerful moments are those that don't rely on traditional horror tropes, but instead tap into the deeper, more universal fears of the human experience. These moments linger long after the film ends, forcing the audience to reflect on the complexities of the human mind and the shadows that lurk within. The horror in You Should Have Left isn't just about what's lurking in the house. It's about what's lurking in the characters' hearts and minds, making every key moment not just terrifying, but deeply tragic as well. The making of You Should Have Left is as much a study of psychological depth as it is a triumph of creative and technical innovation. The film, a slow-burn psychological thriller, takes the familiar concept of a haunted house and flips it on its head, using a minimalist approach to horror that keeps the audience on edge. But what makes You Should Have Left stand out is the behind-the-scenes artistry that went into bringing it to life. From the film's atmosphere to its disorienting narrative, every technical achievement is carefully crafted, making the production process just as fascinating as the film itself. At the heart of the film's success lies its approach to atmosphere. Director David Koepp, who is known for his work on thrillers like Panic Room and Jurassic Park, didn't just want to create a typical haunted house story. Instead, he set out to build an experience where the house itself is not only a physical setting but a reflection of the internal chaos of the characters. This vision required a creative and technical approach that was as immersive as it was unsettling. The house in the film is a masterpiece of minimalist architecture, but it is also a carefully crafted character in itself. Shot on location in Germany, the house is not a set built in a studio. It's a real, modern architectural marvel that stands in stark contrast to the typical Gothic horror setting. However, filming in such a space wasn't without its challenges. The house's design, clean lines, large open spaces, and unconventional layouts presented unique obstacles for the filmmakers. The modern structure, which might seem inviting or even luxurious in a different context, became an oppressive environment, where each hallway and room felt like it was closing in on the characters. In a movie where space itself becomes a character, the filmmakers needed to master the use of angles and perspectives. The house, while sleek and stylish, was difficult to shoot in. The narrow hallways and strange geometry of the space forced the crew to find innovative ways to navigate the environment, capturing the house's unnerving energy without breaking the illusion. One of the biggest challenges was the way the house's design seemed to constantly shift, creating an ever-present sense of distortion. This required the filmmakers to use precise camera angles and careful blocking to make the space feel disorienting. The use of mirrors was also a frequent technique, subtly reflecting and refracting the space to create the impression that something was always lurking just out of sight. The house was not just a backdrop but an active participant in the film's psychological horror, embodying the tension and the disarray that plagued the main character, Theo. One particularly innovative technique that Koepp used to reinforce the sense of unease in the house was the play with perspective. The crew had to shoot some scenes in a way that manipulated the scale and dimensions of the house, making it appear larger or smaller depending on the character's state of mind. The set designers worked in tandem with the camera crew to create these illusions, using forced perspective and varying focal lengths to give the impression that the house itself was shifting in size. In one particularly unsettling moment, the camera focuses on Theo walking down a hallway, and with each step, the hallway seems to elongate unnaturally, creating a feeling of claustrophobia. This sense of the house warping mirrors the psychological fragmentation of the character, allowing the viewer to feel Theo's isolation and his growing paranoia in real time. Filming at a real location instead of a studio set meant that the filmmakers had to deal with a variety of real-world issues. One of the more interesting behind-the-scenes anecdotes is about how the crew dealt with the unexpected challenges of filming in a house that was located in a remote part of Germany. The location, while perfect for the eerie atmosphere they were trying to create, was also incredibly difficult to access. The crew had to contend with weather conditions that were not always conducive to shooting. The remote location meant that transporting equipment and setting up shots could be a time-consuming and complicated process. In one memorable instance, the production crew had to deal with a particularly fierce storm that moved in during an overnight shoot. With no access to nearby hotels or alternate locations, the crew ended up having to huddle inside the house, where they couldn't escape the howling winds and torrential rain outside. Ironically, the storm ended up becoming a key part of the atmosphere of the film, as the sounds of the weather outside added an additional layer of tension to the already uneasy mood. It was a small but significant detail, one of those happy accidents that would ultimately help to reinforce the feeling of being trapped in the house, much like Theo and Susanna. The storm's unpredictable nature mirrored the emotional chaos the characters were experiencing, and it's this blending of real-world challenges with narrative goals that helped make the final film feel so grounded in its horror. Another interesting production hurdle came from the film's sound design. In a film that is as much about psychological tension as it is about supernatural horror, sound plays a crucial role in creating the right atmosphere. The film's sound team had to craft a world where every creak of a floorboard, every shift of the wind, and every whisper in the darkness became a threat in itself. The sound design was subtle but essential in amplifying the sense of dread. In one scene, for instance, when Theo is walking through the house late at night, the sound of his footsteps echoes unnervingly in the silence. The house, devoid of the usual background noise of daily life, becomes a place where every sound feels exaggerated, making the viewer hyper-aware of every shift and movement. What makes the sound design of You Should Have Left so effective is that it doesn't rely on traditional jump scares or loud, bombastic sound effects. Instead, it builds tension by creating an unsettling quiet, punctuated by small, disturbing sounds. The creaking of doors, the distant sound of footsteps, or the whispering wind. All of these sounds are used to reinforce the idea that something is not quite right in the house. The sound work was instrumental in creating the claustrophobic atmosphere that is so central to the film, and much of this effect was achieved through innovative techniques such as the use of binaural recording. This technique places microphones in a way that mimics the human ear, allowing for a more immersive and unsettling listening experience. The sounds seem to come from all directions, disorienting the audience and reinforcing the idea that the house is alive, constantly shifting and reacting to its inhabitants. The film also makes extensive use of digital effects to create the eerie distortions within the house, but these effects are never the film's focal point. Unlike many modern thrillers that rely heavily on CGI or overt supernatural elements, You Should Have Left uses its visual effects subtly, in ways that enhance the story without overpowering it. One of the most notable uses of digital effects happens during Theo's hallucinations, when the world around him starts to bend and warp in ways that feel unnatural. The filmmakers used digital effects to make these hallucinations feel like a natural extension of Theo's mental state, blending the physical world with his fractured mind. The effects are not meant to be flashy. Rather, they serve to blur the lines between what is real and what is in Theo's mind, adding to the psychological complexity of the film. The film's visual palette also plays a key role in reinforcing the tension. The color scheme is muted, with a heavy reliance on shades of gray, cold blues, and sterile whites. This choice of color helps to reinforce the feeling of emotional detachment that permeates the film. The visuals don't offer warmth or comfort. Instead, they evoke a sense of emotional numbness, mirroring Theo's inner turmoil. In one scene, when Theo and Susanna share a quiet, tense conversation in the living room, the cold, gray tones of the room seem to distance them from one another, emphasizing the emotional chasm between them. The desaturated colors and the stark lighting also reflect the minimalism of the house's design, which, in turn, highlights the emotional emptiness that the characters feel. But the visual achievement of the film lies not just in how it uses color and space, but in how it plays with perception. The film's subtle use of visual tricks, like reflections in mirrors or the deliberate manipulation of perspective, further fuels the disorienting nature of the film. These techniques reinforce the idea that the house itself is not just a place but a psychological landscape, where the characters' innermost fears and regrets take physical form. One of the most groundbreaking techniques used in You Should Have Left is how it plays with the passage of time. The film doesn't follow a linear narrative structure but rather weaves in nonlinear moments that seem to exist outside of time. This creates a sense of disorientation for the audience, just as Theo himself becomes increasingly disoriented. The filmmakers employed clever editing and sound design to create these jumps in time, where past and present begin to blur together. This sense of timelessness heightens the feeling of being trapped in the house, as if the characters are unable to escape the psychological traps they have set for themselves. From the carefully chosen location to the innovative use of sound, visual effects, and color, You Should Have Left succeeds in creating a world that is both disorienting and deeply affecting. Each technical choice was made with the goal of enhancing the film's central themes of guilt, isolation, and the inability to escape one's past. The creative and technical innovations that brought this story to life are a testament to the filmmaker's commitment to creating a cinematic experience that is as immersive as it is unsettling. In the end, it's not just the story that makes You Should Have Left a compelling psychological thriller. It's the artistry and ingenuity behind every frame that makes it a haunting, unforgettable experience. You Should Have Left operates as more than just a psychological thriller. At its core, it is a profound exploration of guilt, trauma, and the inescapable nature of the past. While the film carefully treads the line between supernatural horror and emotional unraveling, it's the deeper themes and symbolic layers embedded in the narrative that make it such a compelling and multifaceted experience. Much like its characters, the film itself harbors a sense of fragmentation, piecing together reflections on human psychology, moral responsibility, and the desire to confront one's inner demons. Through its intricate symbolism and its delicate weaving of real-world anxieties, You Should Have Left subtly transforms its haunted house into a mirror for human fragility, laying bare the complex interplay between external terror and internal turmoil. From the very beginning, the film establishes its central theme of guilt, the kind of pervasive, self-destructive guilt that follows you into every space you inhabit, clinging to the very walls around you. Theo, a man with a dark secret buried deep within his past, seems to think that moving to a secluded house in the mountains will offer him a fresh start. But, as we quickly learn, the house is not just an isolated setting. It's an embodiment of his own fractured psyche. His desire to escape is rooted in an attempt to outrun his own memories, his regrets, and his past actions. The house itself becomes a haunting representation of this psychological torment, a space that is both literally and figuratively trapped in time. The symbolism of the house plays a pivotal role in the unfolding narrative. It is not merely a place where the events of the story unfold. It is a living entity that mirrors Theo's inner state. Each room, each hallway, feels like it has been frozen in time, refusing to allow anyone to escape. At first glance, the house appears modern and sophisticated, with its sleek design and sharp lines, but beneath its polished surface, there is something cold and uninviting. This visual choice is key to understanding the house as a symbol of Theo's guilt. The sharp edges, the disorienting architecture, and the claustrophobic spaces all reflect his fractured sense of self and his inability to confront the past. Much like the house, Theo is also trapped. He has built a facade, a seemingly perfect life with Susanna, yet everything beneath the surface is decaying. The film expertly employs this tension between appearances and reality to create an atmosphere of constant unease. As the narrative unfolds, the relationship between Theo and Susanna becomes another layer of thematic exploration. Their connection is not just strained by external factors, but is deeply rooted in the unresolved issues that both characters carry. Theo's guilt, stemming from a past that he desperately wishes to escape, seeps into their interactions. He is constantly haunted by the notion that he is unworthy of Susanna's love, yet he cannot bring himself to tell her the truth. The house becomes a space where their relationship is tested, not just by the external forces of the supernatural but by the internal forces of guilt and deception. What makes this dynamic so poignant is the way it reflects the universal experience of carrying secrets, of trying to forge connections while hiding parts of yourself. The film doesn't take an overtly moralistic approach to Theo's past. Rather, it explores how our secrets shape our relationships and the lengths we go to avoid confronting the consequences of our actions. In a sense, the house is not just Theo's prison. It is a prison that he has built around his relationship with Susanna. It is a place where communication is stifled, and love is stifled by the weight of unspoken truths. But the themes of guilt and self-doubt are not solely internal. they are intricately tied to a more significant societal commentary. The film's psychological horror elements aren't just about the fear of the supernatural. They delve into the anxiety surrounding the notion of the self. In today's world, where the pressures of success, image, and public perception weigh heavily on individuals, You Should Have Left highlights how people often run from the parts of themselves they cannot reconcile. The modern, minimalist design of the house is a direct commentary on the facade that people often construct in order to appear successful, happy, and put together. It reflects the way society prizes perfection and the illusion of having it all, even when underneath it all, there's often something much darker lurking. This sense of societal pressure is most evident when considering Theo's career and the public's perception of him. As a successful financier, Theo is constantly in the public eye, and his past is never truly his own. Every mistake, every flaw is amplified by the scrutiny that comes with fame and wealth. He has built a life that looks perfect on the surface, yet this perfection is a farce, a delicate mask he wears to keep his demons at bay. In this sense, the house becomes an allegory for the way people hide their true selves behind public facades, only to have those facades crack and crumble under the weight of unresolved trauma. The film doesn't just tackle individual guilt. It taps into the pervasive societal anxiety about memory, time, and the inescapable nature of the past. The motif of the house is warped, shifting layout hints at the way time bends and distorts when we attempt to repress painful memories. As Theo's past resurfaces in small, fragmented moments, the house itself seems to respond, shifting, changing, and contorting in ways that defy logic. This temporal disorientation reinforces the idea that the past is never truly gone. It lingers, quietly shaping every choice, every relationship, every moment. The house is not just an isolated place. It is a symbol of how deeply embedded our pasts are in our present lives. This thematic thread pulls the narrative into a more existential territory, raising questions about the nature of time, guilt, and whether it's even possible to truly escape one's own memories. Throughout the film, there is a clear tension between the idea of escape and the futility of that escape. Theo's decision to leave his old life behind, to retreat to a remote house in an attempt to outrun his past, ultimately proves to be an exercise in futility. His desire to escape the house is a reflection of his deeper desire to escape himself, his guilt, his failure, and the legacy of the choices he made. In the end, the house becomes a kind of mirror, showing him not only what he is running from but also what he cannot outrun. This ties into the film's larger social commentary about the ways in which people attempt to escape the consequences of their actions. In a world where escape is often seen as the ultimate form of freedom, through wealth, privilege, or sheer distance from our problems, the film underscores the harsh truth. Escape is often impossible. The house is a metaphor for the psychological consequences of running away, and as Theo comes to understand, the only way to truly escape is to confront what lies within. The film also explores the role of family and relationships in carrying the weight of secrets and guilt. Susanna, as Theo's wife, is the living testament to this emotional burden. Throughout the film, she is portrayed as the calm center to Theo's increasingly chaotic mental state. Yet she too is caught in the web of his guilt. While she may not fully understand the nature of his anguish, she bears witness to it. The film subtly alludes to the ways in which family members often become collateral damage in the wake of unresolved trauma. Susanna's struggles aren't just her own. They are deeply tied to the emotional costs of being close to someone who is unwilling to confront their past. In this way, the house acts as a symbol not just of Theo's internal conflict, but of the ways in which secrets can alienate loved ones, creating an emotional distance that ultimately leads to isolation. In its final moments, the film leaves the audience with a lingering sense of ambiguity. You Should Have Left doesn't provide a clean resolution or a traditional ending, which in itself is a statement about the way that guilt doesn't simply vanish with the closing of a chapter. It lingers, often unresolved, and the consequences of one's actions follow them into the future. The film's ending challenges the audience to confront the emotional messiness of life and to question the narratives they tell themselves about escape, redemption, and transformation. In examining You Should Have Left, it becomes clear that the film is not just a haunting psychological thriller. It is a meditation on the universality of guilt, the burden of secrets, and the inescapable nature of the past. The house, with all of its oppressive design and shifting perspectives, serves as a mirror to the character's internal struggles, reflecting the psychological complexities of living with unresolved trauma. In this way, the film speaks to broader societal concerns about image, success, and the lengths people go to in order to avoid confronting the darker aspects of themselves. You Should Have Left is more than just a story of supernatural terror. It is an exploration of the human condition, showing that sometimes the scariest thing is not what's lurking in the shadows, but what's lurking in our own hearts and minds. You Should Have Left isn't just a psychological thriller. It's a masterclass in visual storytelling. Every frame of the film is carefully constructed to not only convey information but to evoke a visceral reaction, drawing the audience deep into the fractured, haunting world of Theo. The director, David Koepp, known for his sharp storytelling and psychological nuance, uses cinematic techniques to turn the seemingly simple premise of a haunted house into an exploration of fear, guilt, and the complexity of the human psyche. Through clever cinematography, expert use of editing, sound design, and a thoughtful approach to music, Koepp crafts a visual and auditory experience that elevates the film beyond the realm of conventional horror, making the viewer feel as trapped and disoriented as the protagonist. At the core of the film's visual style is its ability to blur the lines between reality and psychological torment. From the very beginning, the house is presented not as a mere setting but as a living, breathing entity, one that is tied intrinsically to Theo's fractured mental state. The house, stark and minimalistic, is designed to feel both clinical and oppressive, its sterile white walls and sleek, open-plan design creating an atmosphere that feels simultaneously cold and suffocating. The architecture is a physical manifestation of Theo's emotional turmoil. At first glance, the house appears modern and elegant, but as the story unfolds, the house becomes an unsettling place of claustrophobia and distortion. The cinematography, spearheaded by director of photography Jeffrey J. Kulczynski, plays a significant role in making the house feel like a maze that constantly shifts, mirroring Theo's internal instability. The camera work often feels as if it's trapping the characters within the confines of the house, with tight, claustrophobic shots that emphasize the isolation they feel. One of the most striking choices is the frequent use of long, slow tracking shots. These shots, often gliding down hallways or panning through rooms, create a sense of creeping dread. The camera lingers, allowing the audience to take in the unsettling details of the space. The sharp lines of the architecture, the sterile surfaces, and the eerie stillness. The slow pacing of these tracking shots creates an unnerving sense of anticipation, as though something just out of sight might suddenly appear. However, these slow, deliberate movements are contrasted by sudden, disorienting changes in perspective. In scenes where Theo's sanity begins to fracture, the camera's movement becomes more erratic and disorienting. In moments of heightened tension, the framing becomes more unstable, and the characters are often placed at the edge of the frame or surrounded by vast, empty spaces. This visual isolation not only emphasizes the characters' emotional distance from one another, but also reflects Theo's increasing sense of alienation. The film's visual language is a testament to the director's skill in using cinematic techniques to externalize internal states, creating a direct connection between the viewer and the character's spiraling mental state. One of the most effective visual motifs is the use of mirrors, reflections, and distorted angles. Mirrors in the film do more than just reflect images. They become symbols of fractured identities and hidden truths. In several scenes, the characters are shown through mirrors or glass, creating a visual disconnect between their physical forms and the reality they perceive. This not only creates a sense of unreality but also reflects the central theme of You Should Have Left, the idea that we are never fully aware of who we are or what we are capable of. The house is, in many ways, a reflection of Theo's own distorted perception of himself. What appears to be one thing is, in fact, something else entirely. In addition to mirrors, the cinematography plays with distorted perspectives to further unsettle the viewer. At times, the camera tilts slightly or focuses on objects in the background that seem to move or shift, creating a sense of disorientation. These small but deliberate visual tricks reinforce the growing tension between what is real and what is imagined. In the world of You Should Have Left, Nothing is stable, and the visuals make sure the audience feels that constant sense of unease. Editing in You Should Have Left serves to heighten the sense of unease and confusion. The film employs a careful balance of slow, drawn-out moments and quick, jarring cuts that mirror Theo's own unraveling psyche. The editing rhythm, especially in scenes where Theo's perception of time begins to warp, takes on an erratic quality, leaving the audience with a sense that something is wrong, even if they can't immediately pinpoint what. The cuts become more abrupt as Theo's world becomes less grounded in reality. In one memorable scene, Theo attempts to confront the house's strange distortions, only to find himself trapped in a loop of disorienting memories. The rapid cutting between past and present, combined with the film's already unstable visual motifs, leaves the audience in a disoriented state, unsure of what is real. These editing choices force the viewer to experience the confusion and dread that Theo feels as he is confronted by the inescapable horror of his past and his present. Perhaps the most integral aspect of the film's storytelling is its use of sound design. In a film where psychological horror takes precedence over physical scares, sound plays a pivotal role in shaping the atmosphere and amplifying the tension. From the moment the audience enters the house, there is an almost oppressive silence, each footstep echoing loudly in the stillness. This deliberate quiet builds the film's unnerving atmosphere, leaving the audience constantly on edge, waiting for something to break the silence. The sound of footsteps, the creak of the floorboards, the wind howling outside. Every small noise is amplified, drawing the viewer's attention to the details that are normally ignored. The isolation of the characters is underscored by the absence of ambient noise, reinforcing the sense that they are alone, trapped in a space that is both oppressive and inescapable. The sound design also works in tandem with the film's visual motifs. The quiet moments are often punctuated by sudden, jarring sounds, a door slamming, the distant sound of footsteps, or an unsettling whisper. These noises come out of nowhere, adding to the tension and creating a constant feeling of unease. They're not always tied to a specific visual event, which keeps the audience on their toes, unsure of where the terror will come from next. In one of the most effective uses of sound, Theo is haunted by the sound of voices, whispers that seem to come from nowhere. These whispers are distorted and distorted again, much like the house itself. They become an auditory manifestation of Theo's fractured mind, a mind that is no longer in control of its own thoughts or memories. Music, too, plays an essential role in the film's atmosphere. The score, composed by Michael Giacchino, leans into the minimalist and eerie, with dissonant, haunting melodies that weave through the scenes, adding to the unsettling nature of the house and the narrative. The music swells at just the right moments, creating a sense of foreboding that builds and builds as the story progresses. It is never overtly loud or bombastic. Instead, the score slowly seeps into the film, increasing the tension without ever overwhelming the audience. The music becomes another layer of the psychological drama, working in tandem with the visuals and sound design to deepen the emotional impact of the story. What makes Giacchino's score so effective is its restraint. Much like the film itself, the music is not flashy or attention-grabbing. Rather, it seeps into the background, reinforcing the themes of isolation and guilt without calling too much attention to itself. The sparse instrumentation, paired with the film's calculated silences, emphasizes the internal nature of the horror. This isn't a film where the audience is assaulted by loud, overwhelming soundtracks. It's a film that builds its terror quietly, allowing the audience to sit with the discomfort of what is left unsaid and unheard. As the story intensifies and Theo's world begins to crumble, the sound design and music blend together in a way that leaves the audience in a heightened state of tension. When the film takes a turn toward the supernatural, the music swells in a way that aligns with the increasingly nightmarish visuals, but even then, it is always in service of the emotional narrative rather than the shock factor. The music never overpowers the film's emotional beats. It complements them, enhancing the feeling of dread and desperation that pervades every frame. In terms of style, Koepp's vision for You Should Have Left is deliberate and focused. His use of slow, deliberate pacing allows the horror to build naturally, rather than relying on jump scares or quick cuts. This measured approach to storytelling allows the audience to get deeply invested in the psychological journey of the characters, particularly Theo. The director's choice to take a minimalist approach, both in terms of the house's design and the film's pacing, is an intentional one. It reflects the emotional emptiness that Theo is trying to escape from and the claustrophobia of his own mind. The visual and auditory techniques of You should have left work in harmony to create a seamless experience where the audience is forced to engage with the psychological turmoil of the characters. Through his expert use of cinematography, editing, sound design, and music, Koepp transforms a simple, haunting house into a reflection of Theo's fragmented psyche. The film's stylistic choices work to immerse the audience in the narrative, creating an experience that is as emotionally unnerving as it is visually striking. In You Should Have Left, the chemistry between the cast members plays a pivotal role in creating a sense of tension and complexity that fuels the film's psychological narrative. The dynamic between the lead actors, Kevin Bacon, Amanda Seyfried, and the ensemble cast, is essential in delivering a story that isn't just about the supernatural elements but also about the human drama that unfolds within the confines of the mysterious house. This relationship dynamic anchors the film, providing depth to its eerie atmosphere and enhancing the emotional stakes. Kevin Bacon's portrayal of Theo, a once successful banker now racked with guilt and desperately trying to hold his family together, is a study in restraint and complexity. Bacon is a seasoned actor known for his ability to capture characters who are, in many ways, on the edge of collapse. His performance in You Should Have Left is no exception. As Theo, Bacon imbues the character with a palpable sense of internal conflict. The character is haunted not only by the house but by his own past, an ex-wife, a tragic history, and a sense of inadequacy that festers beneath his outward calm. The emotional weight that Bacon brings to the role is palpable, and his chemistry with Amanda Seyfried is crucial in making the tension between Theo and his wife, Susanna, so engaging. Seyfried, known for her versatility, plays Susanna with an intriguing mix of vulnerability and strength. She is both the anchor and the mystery within the family. On the surface, she seems to be the more grounded character, but as the story unravels, it becomes clear that she, too, carries her own secrets and emotional baggage. Seyfried's performance subtly shifts from being the supportive wife to someone who, at times, seems just as lost and disoriented as Theo. Her relationship with Bacon's Theo is one of the film's key driving forces. Together, their performances amplify the movie's central tension. Is the danger within the house real, or is it just a projection of their crumbling relationship? The chemistry between Bacon and Seyfried feels authentic, perhaps because they shared a deep understanding of their characters' psychological complexities. Both actors embraced their roles fully, giving the film a sense of intimacy that would have been difficult to achieve without that mutual trust and shared vision. The moments of closeness between Theo and Susanna are quietly intense, offering a glimpse into their complicated, fractured relationship. These moments of connection, paired with the haunting presence of the house, create a tension that is both palpable and subtle. As for the house itself, the setting is as much a character as any of the human performers. The production design, led by Christy Fraser, was integral in creating the film's mood and amplifying the performances. The house, minimalist and modern, initially appears to be a sleek and luxurious vacation home, a place for Theo and Susanna to escape and rebuild. However, it quickly becomes something else entirely. A confounding, shifting labyrinth that mirrors Theo's psyche. Fraser's design choices, cold, sterile walls, and a looming, expansive interior, reinforce the isolation the characters feel within it. The house's sheer size and the calculated emptiness of the space reflect the emotional distance between the couple. The unsettling architecture plays into the characters' evolving sense of dread, making it difficult to discern whether the house is actively threatening them or if their fear is a product of their fractured emotional states. The house's presence is so overwhelming that it affects the performances of Bacon and Seyfried, who are often seen alone or together within its vast halls. This sense of isolation was deliberately constructed on set, where the actors often filmed in rooms that were sparsely decorated, allowing the oppressive atmosphere of the space to become part of their performance. Behind the scenes, there was a strong emphasis on allowing the actors to respond organically to the environment. Bacon and Seyfried's performances were shaped by the unpredictability of the house itself, with certain aspects of the script remaining fluid to create a sense of improvisation and reaction to the space. This contributed to the natural, lived-in quality of their performances, as both actors were consistently reacting to each other, the space, and the mounting pressure of their unraveling situation. While the chemistry between the lead actors was key to the film's emotional depth, the supporting cast members also made important contributions. The role of Ella, played by Avery Essex, Theo, and Susanna's young daughter, serves as a catalyst for much of the film's emotional tension. Ella, who is eerily calm in the face of the strange happenings in the house, brings an additional layer of mystery to the narrative. Essex's performance as Ella is understated but haunting. She conveys a sense of innocence tinged with something darker. Her calm demeanor in the face of the house's horrors unsettlingly contrasts with the growing panic of her parents. This dynamic between Theo, Susanna, and Ella is crucial in shaping the film's psychological terror. As Theo becomes increasingly unstable, the way the family interacts in these confined, oppressive spaces adds to the film's atmosphere of dread. Behind the scenes, the production team worked tirelessly to capture the eerie, dreamlike quality of the film's setting. One memorable behind-the-scenes story revolves around how the crew used lighting to create a constantly shifting atmosphere within the house. The production team employed a combination of practical and artificial lighting to give the space a ghostly, ever-changing feel, furthering the illusion that the house was not merely a building but a reflection of the characters' inner turmoil. Many of the house's design elements were intentionally built to disorient the viewer, with hallway doors that led to unexpected places and rooms that seemed to stretch beyond their physical limits. This attention to detail made the house a character in itself, influencing the performances of the cast and setting the tone for the entire film. The film's production was far from simple. In fact, it involved a number of challenges that the cast and crew had to overcome. One particularly difficult moment came when the crew had to simulate a scene where Theo begins to lose his grip on reality, caught in a warp-time loop within the house. This scene required intricate choreography and timing, as the actors had to interact with props and set pieces that were moving or disappearing in real time. This disorienting sequence was shot using a combination of practical effects and clever camera techniques, which demanded precision from both the actors and the crew. The filming process was physically and mentally taxing, as the actors had to maintain a high level of emotional intensity while working within a confined and frequently unsettling environment. Despite the challenges, the cast remained committed to the film's vision, and their dedication is reflected in the final product. As the film entered its release phase, audience reactions were mixed but largely positive. Viewers appreciated the slow-burn tension of the film, its atmospheric dread, and the subtle yet effective scares. Critics hailed the film for its psychological depth and its ability to blend horror with a more nuanced examination of grief and guilt. Bacon's performance, in particular, was singled out for praise, with many critics noting his ability to convey a character unraveling under the weight of his past and the pressure of the house's malevolent presence. Seyfried, too, received accolades for her layered portrayal of Susanna, a character whose true motivations were slowly revealed in a way that kept the audience guessing. However, not all reviews were glowing, with some critics pointing to the film's slow pacing and lack of overt horror elements as a drawback. Some viewers, expecting a more traditional haunted house film, found the narrative's psychological approach to be too subtle for their tastes. Nevertheless, the film's exploration of the boundaries between perception and reality resonated with a significant portion of the audience, and it soon found a dedicated following. The film's ambiguous ending, which leaves some questions unanswered, sparked debates among viewers and fueled discussion on social media and fan forums. In the months and years following its release, You Should Have Left developed a loyal fan base that appreciated the film's deeper thematic layers and its cerebral approach to horror. Fans continued to dissect the film's symbolism, hidden details, and the complex relationship dynamics between the characters. The film became a conversation piece for those interested in psychological horror and its exploration of grief, guilt, and the human condition. Fans often discussed their theories regarding the nature of the house and the true extent of Theo's guilt, with many revisiting the film to pick up on details they missed during their first viewing. Overall, the lasting impact of You Should Have Left lies in its ability to transcend the typical horror genre. While the film certainly plays on supernatural elements, it is ultimately more about the psychological unraveling of a family under pressure. The cast's chemistry and their ability to portray complex, multi-layered characters enhance the film's emotional depth, while behind-the-scenes efforts to create a disorienting, immersive environment helped solidify the film's place in modern psychological thrillers. The movie's reception, both from critics and fans, reflects its lasting appeal and its ability to spark ongoing conversations about the nature of fear, guilt, and memory. You Should Have Left may have been a seemingly quiet entry into the world of psychological horror upon its release in 2020, but its impact has reverberated far beyond its immediate reception. It is a film that will likely be discussed and analyzed for years to come, not because it followed the typical horror tropes, but because it subverted them in ways that left audiences reflecting on its deeper meanings long after the credits rolled. Its legacy is built not on the shock and awe of conventional horror, but on its slow burn tension, complex characters, and haunting atmosphere that challenges the boundaries between reality and perception. One of the most striking aspects of the film's influence is the way it pushed the boundaries of the horror genre. While You Should Have Left is undeniably a supernatural thriller, it strays far from the well-worn path of jump scares and gore that so often dominate horror cinema. It takes a more cerebral approach, using atmosphere, psychological tension, and the exploration of guilt and trauma to create a sense of dread. This emphasis on slow-burn horror, rather than shock value, has resonated with audiences and filmmakers alike, contributing to a broader discussion on the future of horror in cinema. As streaming platforms like Netflix and Hulu continue to commission films in the genre, You Should Have Left serves as a template for more intimate, nuanced stories that prioritize emotional and psychological impact over traditional horror mechanics. Its influence can also be seen in the rise of similarly atmospheric horror films that followed in its wake, films that lean heavily into psychological tension. Works such as The Invisible Man, 2020, The Night House, 2020, and The Lodge, 2019, share thematic and stylistic elements with You Should Have Left. These films often feature troubled protagonists who grapple with their own personal demons and have to confront their past, much like Theo in You Should Have Left. The success of these films and the way they have found a home in both indie and mainstream horror markets demonstrates that audiences are hungry for a more sophisticated and layered approach to fear, one that can resonate on an emotional and intellectual level rather than just relying on cheap thrills. The film also had a subtle but undeniable impact on the way filmmakers approached horror from a technical standpoint. The director, David Koepp, is a seasoned screenwriter and filmmaker, and his ability to create tension through pacing and space was something new for a genre that often relies on rapid-fire cuts and excessive visual stimuli. The use of long, lingering shots, quiet moments of suspense, and carefully crafted You Should Have Left remains one of those rare films that lingers long after the screen goes black, staying with the viewer like an unsettling thought you can't quite shake. What starts as a seemingly simple haunted house tale soon evolves into a psychological exploration of guilt, trauma, and memory. This shift from traditional horror to a more introspective, emotional journey is what sets the film apart from its peers in the genre, elevating it into something that sticks with you rather than fades into obscurity. The film's beauty lies in its simplicity. At first glance, the story might appear to be just another supernatural thriller, but You Should Have Left delves into the very human fears that drive its characters. From the opening shot of the sleek and seemingly perfect vacation home to the moment the house itself begins to distort and shift, You Should Have Left forces us to reckon with the idea that sometimes the scariest thing isn't the supernatural, but the reflection of ourselves that we see in the dark corners of our minds. The performances, especially from Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried, elevate this exploration of fear and loss. Bacon's portrayal of Theo, a man attempting to escape a haunting past, grounds the film in raw emotion. His vulnerability, mixed with the cold facade of the house, creates a character who is as much a prisoner of his memories as he is of the house. Seyfried, as Susanna, brings a quiet intensity to the film, shifting from a supportive wife to a figure with hidden layers, revealing a complex character who drives the narrative forward. Together, they craft a relationship that feels real and poignant, even in the midst of the supernatural horrors that unravel around them. The house itself plays a starring role in You Should Have Left. It's not just the setting but an active, almost sentient force within the narrative. The sleek, modern architecture initially suggests luxury and comfort, but as the film progresses, the house becomes increasingly foreboding, its walls and rooms shifting in ways that defy logic and reason. It serves as both a literal and figurative reflection of the psychological turmoil the characters experience, making the house itself a character in the story. The decision to have the house distort in subtle ways, rather than overtly grotesque or monstrous, makes the terror that much more effective. It's not the house itself that is terrifying, but the way it mirrors Theo's inner struggle. A key aspect of You Should Have Left that sets it apart is its pacing. The film does not rush into its scares or twists. Instead, it builds slowly, allowing the tension to mount and the viewer to become increasingly unsettled as the boundaries between reality and nightmare begin to blur. It's a film that rewards patience, encouraging viewers to think critically about what they're watching, while also allowing the subtle horror to seep in through the cracks of the characters' fractured lives. The result is a film that feels more unsettling and cerebral than most traditional horror films, where the focus is often on the quick jolt of fear rather than on the slower, more insidious terror that creeps under your skin over time. The film also stands out because of its unique approach to the supernatural. It doesn't rely on ghosts, ghouls, or jump scares, which have become ubiquitous in the horror genre. Instead, You Should Have Left utilizes the psychological aspects of horror to create a narrative where the main character's own guilt and past mistakes come back to haunt him, literally and figuratively. This exploration of psychological horror, combined with the eerie atmosphere of the house, taps into a deeper, more unsettling fear that is rooted in human experience rather than the supernatural. As the film progresses, the viewer begins to question whether the house is truly haunted or if Theo is simply unraveling due to the weight of his past, making the horror feel grounded and relatable, despite the surreal elements. Behind the scenes, director David Koepp brings his considerable talent to bear on this project, ensuring that every detail, from the pacing to the atmosphere to the subtle shifts in the house, serves the overall psychological tension of the film. Koepp, known for his work as a screenwriter on Jurassic Park and Spider-Man, brings a unique sensibility to You Should Have Left, one that marries the classic elements of horror with more contemporary, character-driven storytelling. His direction ensures that every frame of the film serves to heighten the sense of dread, whether through lingering shots that invite the audience to become paranoid alongside the characters, or through the subtle visual cues that suggest something isn't quite right. The visual style of You Should Have Left is also crucial to its storytelling. Cinematographer Frederick Elms creates a world that feels both familiar and off-kilter, playing with lighting and shadows in ways that unsettle and disturb. The film's use of space, how the house is framed and how it shifts in unexpected ways, mirrors the growing sense of unease within the characters. From the wide, empty spaces of the house to the increasingly claustrophobic shots that close in on Theo and Susanna, the visuals reflect the tension that builds throughout the narrative. The production design plays with this theme by making the house feel vast and cold, and yet it's filled with uncomfortable angles and hidden nooks that seem to change each time the characters explore them. The spaces feel unfamiliar even when they're familiar, echoing the character's sense of alienation. In terms of its cultural impact, You Should Have Left has carved out a niche in the horror genre by appealing to fans who appreciate a more cerebral, psychological brand of horror. It has sparked countless discussions about its themes, particularly around trauma, memory, and guilt, and has become a favorite for those who enjoy analyzing the deeper layers beneath the surface. The film's subtlety and ambiguity have made it a point of discussion in horror communities, where fans dissect every frame, every line of dialogue, and every small detail for hidden meanings and foreshadowing. Its ambiguous ending, in particular, has inspired fan theories and debates, ensuring that the film will continue to be analyzed for years to come. The lasting appeal of You Should Have Left is rooted in its ability to offer more than just superficial horror. It resonates on a deeper level because it tackles universal themes that everyone can relate to: grief, guilt, and the ways in which our past shapes our present. The Horror in You Should Have Left isn't just about the house. It's about the ways in which we are haunted by our own actions and the emotional baggage we carry with us. In this sense, the film offers a more personal, relatable form of terror, one that feels more psychological than physical. The ghost in this film is not just a supernatural presence, but the specter of the characters' pasts, which they cannot escape, no matter how hard they try. The film's ability to blend traditional horror elements with a deeper exploration of the human condition makes it stand out in the crowded genre of psychological thrillers and supernatural horror. Its quiet, haunting atmosphere has proven to be just as effective in leaving a lasting impression on audiences as any loud, explosive scare. In many ways, You Should Have Left has become a touchstone for the evolution of horror films, especially those that focus more on the psychological and emotional aspects of fear rather than relying solely on the supernatural or physical. In conclusion, You Should Have Left is not just a horror film. It's a meditation on the lasting effects of trauma, the limitations of memory, and the ways in which we confront or ignore our past. Its slow-building tension, atmospheric dread, and complex characters make it a standout in the psychological horror genre, offering a fresh take on a familiar narrative. It's a film that continues to resonate with audiences and has earned its place in the pantheon of films that use horror to explore deeper, more profound human experiences. If you love this breakdown, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of cinema. Let's keep exploring movies together.